Greetings, everybody, and welcome. This is the Middle Grades Collaborative Conversations #2. This is our 7th season, and we meet monthly to talk about current issues in middle level education. This work is supported by the Middle Grades Collaborative, the Tarrant Institute for Innovative Education, and we also partner with Up4 Learning. My name is Don Taylor. I teach sustainability at Main Street Middle School in Montpelier. And we're joined by 4 other contributors who will introduce themselves. Maura?
Hi, I'm Maura Wheeler. I am the proficiency-based learning and technology integration coach at Lamoille South.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kevin Peely Hunt. I'm a 5'8" teacher on Swift House in Williston Central School.
Hi there. I'm Meg O'Donnell. I teach humanities at Shelburne Community School.
Hi, I'm Sarah Popowitz, and I am a program director with Up4 Learning.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. So this month's topic, we were going to talk about how we're all teaching through the 3rd year of a pandemic and how that's having outsized impact on both our instructional strategies, our teachers, our systems, and most of all, our students. In our last conversation, we also talked, though, about how this can create opportunities. And one of the things, or a couple of things we're going to talk about this afternoon, is how teachers are transforming or changing their practice to accommodate the different situations related to teaching through a pandemic. But we also wanted to go back and focus on our equity and anti-racism work. As many of you are aware, across the state of Vermont recently, there have been some racial incidents and issues, and how are folks talking about those in the classroom with students, and how are we connecting that to some of our anti-racism and equity work when folks are already dealing with multiple stressors. So I guess just first to hear from folks how you're doing, and maybe in our 3rd year of the pandemic, what are some of the things that you're seeing, and how are you changing some of your practice. Before we get there, though, we do have a guest, Miss Hannah Barden, who's from Montpelier School System, and Hannah is going to jump on, and I'd like to welcome her. She is I'll let her introduce herself in just a second. But again, the question for folks is, how are you kind of dealing with the impacts of COVID? And Hannah, thank you so much for joining us. Do you want to just give us a quick introduction of where you are and what you're teaching and some of the work that you're doing?
Sure. I'm here at Main Street Middle School in Montpelier, and I am one of the English learner teachers for the district. And one of my roles here at the middle school is to be the Equity Alliance co-facilitator. So having some conversations with Don, and he invited me to join you all today.
All right, thanks so much, Hannah. We're just getting started. So I guess we'll start with Maura. I'll put the new chat order in. Oh, sorry, I put the new speaking order in the chat. But Maura, start us off.
Yeah, so thinking about, I think the question was sort of like, what are you seeing and how are you changing your practice, and sort of like, how are you doing in the 3rd year of the pandemic? And so I would say for us, our focus since the start of the year was really on cultivating safe and healthy schools, and really thinking about a big focus of our work this year is around strengthening collaborative teaming practices for teachers, and really thinking about how can we utilize teams to really support one another. I think so much of the work during the pandemic, we were sort of like constantly chasing, and not that we're not constantly chasing things previously, but a lot of times people were just trying to fix something or get something done. And so really trying to take a moment to slow down and really think about how we use our teaming structures, and teaming structures beyond maybe just like a grade level or a content area team, to really strengthen supports around the school. We're also, I think someone said, feeling the fatigue of October already, and trying to really be responsive to, hearing from teachers that they're March tired, and how are we supporting teachers, because, they're showing up with students every day, and how are we helping to cultivate some resilience and really, think about schools as places for healing as we're still going on through the pandemic, which is really hard. And there are things that we are not doing very well, but just trying to be really mindful of that. And in terms of like equity and anti-racist work, we have a equity subcommittee from our school board who's working at sort of like the policy and structure level. That's new this year. And we have students, Up for Learning is helping us with this. And we have students that are a part of that work, and really considering, I think like a lot of schools, we are seeing that there's some real harm that's happening in schools right now, and really thinking about welcoming students back full time, living in the third year of the pandemic, trying to also move forward with instruction and intervention, and students being in a full schedule and really supporting students where they are. And so, I think we're trying to juggle all of those pieces that I know so many other districts and schools are also faced with. So I think that's sort of like the quick pulse of where we are.
Thanks, Maura.
Yeah, on our end, when you think about dealing with the impact of COVID in the third year, things that we're noticing, we had a faculty meeting, and this is honestly one of the questions that came up, and across the board, like everybody's just recognizing that kids are really struggling with stamina, and just this, being in the building. For us, again, we were hybrid last year, so we never had any 5-day weeks last year with kids in the building, and we're definitely seeing it still. And just the ability to kind of like get into some of the work and do some of the heavier lifting a little bit. And we're, thinking back, our 5th graders haven't had a legitimate school year since they were 2nd graders. And it's just wild to think that, some of the things that you typically assume 5th graders is some of the social skills and pieces that they have coming in are things that we're, we're really having to back up and take our time with, which is great and fine. And it's allowing us to refocus our team a little bit around those relationships and team building, which is awesome. But it's also, it changes your pace a little bit, which is, like I said, it's totally fine. Then, one thing for us that we've been really trying to do this year is keep some of our team building traditions alive, which, again, as a 4-year team, we have this really nice balance of, families and our students who by the time they're 7th and 8th grade, experience our camp out and our field trips and some of the big team events, our theater unit that we do. So by the time they're 7th and 8th graders, they're showing, the 5th and 6th graders what's going on and kind of bringing them under their wing. And, we're at a point now where, with the pandemic, we had we weren't able to do some of those things. So now it's like we're almost reintroducing some of those traditions, which again puts us in a neat spot, but it's also, hard because we're still in a pandemic. We're still dealing with the masks and the fatigue setting in. But it's good. And I think, right now we're in the middle of our theater unit, and we're a couple uphill battles to make sure like we can get parents to come in to observe it and get live audiences for the kids. And it's, for us, it's a little extra lifting on the back end, and we're feeling that for sure. But it's at the same time, like seeing the kids like really working together, collaborating cross grade levels too is such a big part that we appreciate, that we were missing the past couple of years when we had to go hybrid. So, it's work that is important. But yeah, I'm not gonna lie, it's tough, it's exhausting. I think as all of you in the buildings know, like it's an extra load this year, and we're feeling it. Social justice DEI wise, we're really trying to maintain our focus on having social justice be just part of our curriculum and not having it be a standalone unit. So, every time we're working with our 5th and 6th graders, or 7th and 8th graders, whether it be humanities or just other content areas, it's not something separate. It's just like we don't even call it social studies class anymore. It's social justice, and finding those times where we can integrate other content area through it. But it's like we've said it before, the kids are so ripe for it and ready for have the conversations, and just sometimes just giving them the space and the prompt and just being like, all right, let's talk, like let's open it up. I had a great conversation with our 5th and 6th grade class the other day. We read an article about mascots and changing some mascots, and man, as for 10, 11-year-olds, like I just kind of stood back and like let them have the conversation. It was such a beautiful thing to get them talking about it. And I'm like, this is the important work. So I'm glad that we're able to give the kids space to have those conversations.
Kev, I wish we could like find a way to to like be flies on each other's like classroom walls, because I feel like so often you share something and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm doing the same thing. Like, I'm not doing all the same things, but just and I wish we were in a play right now. That would just be that would really fire me up. That sounds awesome. I just have to acknowledge, like, I am feeling for our colleagues in Bristol Elementary School, and I just want to say that because I feel like we have kids that are just hurting. They're just struggling to be in this fatigue of 5 days and classrooms and the trauma that they experienced for whatever reasons don't end at the door when they come in to our schools. And Don, I also want to just give like an appreciation for the framing of that question of what opportunities are we seeing in our current teaching, because I think it is really I think it's really easy to just let the fatigue be the speaker and not like, okay, what are we really trying to do? And so that's helping me to respond. And so some of the things that I think I'm noticing in my practice that I'm trying to implement are really just, you guys have been doing this for longer, but I'm really just focusing on some mindfulness strategies. I found a resource on opening and closing practices, and I'm good about the opening part. I haven't quite nailed the closing part, but just like giving a minute to just take a deep breath, to ground ourselves in some work, to try to be predictable for kids, like just being very consistent. I'm just trying to nail the consistency. And two of the targets that I'm really working on right now are listening and speaking. It's one of our district targets, and it's such a subjective target to practice, but kids want to talk. Like when we ask them, when we solicited some student voice on our some curriculum development, they acknowledged like they want to debate, they want to argue, and we said, all right, let's first start by just having some discussion and conversation. And so that has and what are the skills that we need to be good listeners, and then to be good speakers with one another, even if it's just like in small groups at a table. And we're talking about things related to social identity and stereotypes and bias. It has been really rewarding to just see them settle into the routine most days, and just talk about what they notice, what are their observations, what are their thoughts about it, and really relying heavily on Facing History resources, because I just love some of the stuff that they put together. But the one thing I just wanted to add was John Downs wrote an article this week for Tarrant that was around personal efficacy, using Chris Stevenson's 5 categories of personal efficacy. And we use that as a weekly email communication with families. But the purpose of that article was really for teachers, it was for adults. And I just recognize the importance for us as adults. And I'll just read them really quick. It's competency, it's responsibility, it's awareness, it's affiliation, and it's ethical sense of self. And I just, it was been exciting in our circle this week to have the kids talk about that. And I want us as adults to be reflecting on those competencies.
Great, thanks, Meg. Yeah, so as a program director with Up for Learning, I am not in one classroom. I'm in many classrooms. I'm in schools all over Vermont and throughout the country as well. And it has been very clear that what everyone is experiences is not isolated. It's in every school we're working with, whether you're in Vermont or across the country, and even some of our international partners are experiencing a lot of the same pieces. So you're not alone, and everyone's sort of like digging in. And I think that one of the strands that we're focusing on and really seeing how our work is shifting to help support the needs is that there's sort of like a few different pieces that are playing the role. And you've mentioned all of them at this intro, but we're seeing a lot of like needing to reconnect as community, as learners, as people, like Kevin talking about all of the those traditions. Like when you're teaming in middle school, those traditions, those like that sense of community, that is so beyond important and critical to just like the middle level experience in general. And then to help feed the motivation and the passion and the interest for the learning extended. Like, you have to have that sense of community and belonging and, quite frankly, joy to be in the space that you're in, to then translate that to sort of the metacognition and mindset and motivation pieces, right? It's like it's all connected. And so we're finding this this level of really needing to help schools with some of that connectedness, some of that like mindset and motivation for learning, because it's been 3 years since they've really like been in this traditional learning place or a consistent learning space, I guess I should say. And then the really focusing on equity and just making sure that youth and adults have language and feel like they can communicate on these really important topics on a day-to-day basis. So there's a whole lot of stuff that is like shifting around, and it's like these puzzle pieces of how to take a little bit of here and a little bit of here and a little bit of here and help give educators something that they feel like they can work with on a daily basis to lay a little bit of that foundation on this year that I think everyone thought was going to feel a little more straightforward and does not feel straightforward at all. And so, yeah, it's a work in progress with lots of those pieces, but that's what we're seeing from our end.
Thanks, Sarah.
Okay, these are some big questions, like 3 really big questions here. So it's hard for me to know where to start with them all, but I guess where I don't even know where to start, but everything that you all are saying resonates with me, and I especially appreciate the perspective of how long it's been since kids have been working together in a community in a really connected way. I think that I've sort of been trying to figure out what's going on with what I'm seeing with what kids are struggling with, and I think that really resonates with me as something that people have not been living in and working, and especially middle schoolers have not been in that in such a large percentage of their life, that really resonates as something that is going on for them. I guess another thing that I'm really thinking about is that cliched oxygen mask, where we are trained to be so student-centered, and that's really important, but I'm really concerned about adults and administrators right now, because if they're not okay, then the kids aren't going to be okay. And so I feel like I'm in a really lucky position in that last year I, like everyone else, felt like I was doing 2 or 3 jobs at the same time, and this year I went in saying I will not survive if I am doing that, and really being sort of making it my top priority to make sure that I'm doing okay so that I can be there for students. And I think that I feel lucky that I'm able to do that. My role kind of gives me a little bit of more control over my time than a lot of other people have. And I think that's giving me a viewpoint, sort of a place to see how much our administrators are struggling and how much all the adults in the building are struggling. I was just talking to a teacher today who said that I was actually over in the elementary school, but they said the administrators from the office are coming over and cleaning the building at night because they can't find people to do it. And just that level of responsibility that's on the adult. So although I know that I want to be thinking student-centered, I'm just keep coming back to the idea that if administrators and teachers and other staff are not okay, then we can't begin to help students with the challenges that they're having. On the race and equity question, I've really tried to again narrow my focus and work with. There's so many ways that could go. There's so many big important questions and problems that could be pursued, and so I've really tried to focus myself on one student group that I'm trying to support and make a viable place for student discussion. And it's not an easy thing to do in middle school. To provide room for all the conversations. And I think something I'm struggling with is we've been meeting after school, which is a tricky thing. I'd like to be having more of these conversations during the school day, which is why I really appreciate what I know Dawn is doing in our building, and it sounds like a lot of you are doing in your buildings, making these conversations feel like an integral part of the curriculum instead of an extra. And so I'm going to stop there because I think I could talk all day, but I feel like I'm starting to ramble.
So thank you very much, Hannah. I appreciate that. And Joe, the stage is set. First, welcome and thanks for coming. And if you can just give us a quick introduction, and we're kind of talking about what we're seeing and experiencing here in the first month or so of school, and we'll continue that conversation and talk about maybe some of the ways that we're hoping to move forward in addressing it. But what are you noticing? How are the kids doing? And how is that impacting your instruction?
I was thinking that, well, hi, thanks. I'm Joe Rivers. I work at Brattleboro Area Middle School, and Maslow's hierarchy of needs is what has been flashing in front of me lately. I know there's real debate about whether it's really a hierarchy or not, or whether it's just a bunch of needs that we all have, but we're functioning as a system, I think, at that basic level where we're trying to meet everyone's basic needs and their safety needs, and then a little bit of the belonging and trying to find your way. And those are the things that are taking up the majority of our thought process. Where there's a disconnect, I think, going on a little bit is that our that I think is what really needs to be addressed now are those three things, and our schedules don't necessarily match up with that, and our schedules for the most part have been reintroduced from pre-COVID, and so there's a disconnect between the needs of students and staff working together in this environment and the schedules that are provided to us to try to do those things. So here we're focusing right now on schedule and trying to adjust that so that there is more time built in for SEL work, and trying to acknowledge, it's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to give time to it. And so we're trying to carve out time. So that's where I think people believed that when we were coming back that things would be better than they are. And so we're in this, and we need to adjust in order to meet the needs of the young folks we're working with.
Thank you. I would just echo a lot of what people are saying. I wrote down some of the key words for me. One of the things that I'm concerned about, to echo what Joe is saying, is that, and I think Maura started using this word harm. Like, how is harm occurring with students, and is it being caused by what the school, like the scheduling and what we're expecting of schools and what we're talking about? And so to me, that is something that I'm deeply concerned with, and also the needs of our students right now, and how many of our students, I feel, have lots of needs that aren't being met, and they're responding. Some of our kids, as was mentioned, have not been in school or in a community for a long time. And so when those needs aren't being met, I feel like that's coming out in behavior. And I think it's also coming out in language. And I'm hearing a lot of language that is hurtful or careless. And I think that's having a real impact on other kids in the community. And one of the huge gaps in the start to my school year is that I've been working with Sarah to create a sustainability program. And when I first started, I was thinking about, environment and sustainable practices. And as we've seen some of these racial issues occur across Vermont, and as we've been thinking about it, and I know Hannah talks about language and, racial language or homophobic language that is tossed around carelessly, that in order to have a sustainable community, you have to have that social justice piece. And so moving forward, that's something that I'm really focused on, is we can't expect people to commit and belong in a community if they're worried about being harmed, or if they feel like they're not safe, or if they feel like they don't have those relationships. And as Joe mentioned, I'm starting to think that those are what should just be our curriculum for this year. And we'll talk about this in just a little bit, but that's influenced how I'm running my classes. I'm also trying to change my interactions with students to reflect that. And I'm thinking deeply about what really matters. And to me right now, it's that kids feel safe coming into class, that they want to come into class, and that they have an experience that is largely positive. And that right now, as we've talked about, can be difficult because we're all in this, and it's very difficult. And I think what's happening too is that when we have behaviors that are pushing us, that it's difficult to maintain that perspective of calm, caring, cool, loving, and healing. And I think Maura might have said this too, is are our schools a place for healing? Or did we go back to sort of this normal system? And how do we focus on a place that does no harm and is a place of healing, and that is cradling our kids who need so much? So many of our kids need so many different things. And how can we be creating a school experience that starts to address those in a loving, welcoming, and healing way? So that's kind of where I'm at and what I'm seeing. And one of the things that I've been doing quite a bit is thinking also about those conversations that we need to have with kids. On this webinar last year, we heard from kids saying that if we're not having those conversations in school, kids are looking at us adults and saying, you're ignoring the situation. And by ignoring the situation, you're allowing it to continue. So having those conversations, I think, is really critical. And there have been several times this year where I sit down with a notepad and I just start asking questions and having kids respond to those questions. And then that dialogue, how does that dialogue, or how do you create places with that dialogue that you can then turn around and create trauma-informed instruction and trauma-informed teaching to honor those conversations, and also to keep those doors open. And I think a big piece for me, I know Hannah talked about, looking at the teachers, and one thing I'm looking at is student-teacher perspective. And so I ask questions like, do you think you have a trusted adult at school? do you think our teachers are listening? And kids know, they said to me, well, Mr. Taylor, we were talking about behavior, but what's really happening is a kid using a slur. And why aren't they, naming it and saying this is just not okay and teaching about that. So that's, I think, a disconnect between the adults and the students. That's concerning to me. So thank you all for your thoughts on that. I think those are really important. I don't have the answers to them, but it certainly adds to kind of what the conversation that's happening in my head. And I guess the next question really is, what are folks, we talked a little bit about this, but what are folks actually doing? So if you were somebody watching this and saying, well, okay, this is all happening, what are some strategies or what are some nuts and bolts things that you're doing in your classrooms or in your lesson plans or in your experiential designs to address these issues? And we'll just open it up. We'll start again with Maura and just kind of hear what are some specifics that people could say, yeah, this is happening in my school. What do I need to be thinking about or doing on a regular basis?
Thanks. It's so hard to go first. I feel like by the end of the question, I then have all these connections I want to make with people. But thinking about some specific strategies, I think the first, there are a lot of pressures on schools right now, and some do not reflect that we're in the third year of a pandemic. And we were trying to be really mindful and reframing. Yes, there are all these external pressures that we're, doing these things and, getting back to, X, Y, or Z. And, really reframing and saying, hey, we're still trying to really we have contact tracing we need to do. We have some of these things that we need to do. And so really thinking about, what are the priorities for this year? And if things don't rise to the level of those priorities, like safe and healthy schools, then, trying to really put a pause on those things. But then sort of at a more practical level, our students are really struggling. I think it's, we've all said it. And one thing that we are starting to do is really looking at internalized behavior screeners. So really trying to get, which I know sounds very technical, but one of the things that we're really wondering is a lot of the things that we're seeing are some externalized behaviors, and we're really focused on those right now, and realizing that there's other groups of students who are also not doing well that we're just not seeing because we're so much in that reactive mode or following behaviors. I think the other thing that people also mentioned is, we're really short on support. And so thinking about getting subs in the building and, mental health supports, hiring behavioral interventionists, things like that. And so we just don't have the personnel that sometimes we would have. And so really trying to think about how are we making sure that we're not always tapping into the same people, to support or cover. And so those are some of the larger things. And then I think Hannah said it so clearly about the oxygen mask, really thinking about even personally, how am I making sure that my oxygen mask is on? And I think so much about this is impacting everyone, right? Every family, every person is being impacted in some way by the third year of the pandemic. And so, how are we making sure that as we're coming into work or hard conversations that we're regulated? And some days are better than others, but how are we making sure that we have the capacity to be able to sit in it? Because that's really what's happening at the moment. And I'm sure as soon as people start talking, I'll have other ideas as well.
Thanks, Maura. Kevin?
Yeah, a few things that come to mind, within our system, having regular advisories as a place to connect with students and really just check in with them, doing the mindfulness activities there, having that small group that you do have that really tight relationship with, and just being able to air out, just if things come up, just having those heart-to-heart conversations with them. I mean, this morning, talking about language, I just had a really tough conversation with my group about, hey, we've been hearing some language that we're not really excited about. And then we had a really just nice conversation about what it means to belong to a community, and the words we use and the impact those words can have on people in terms of everybody feeling safe in our community. And I think it was pretty well received, and it was just nice to hear them share their thoughts around it as well. And one thing, you know, after I keep coming back to Alex Bennett's book about trauma-informed, equity-centered practices, and I've been really trying, you know, I feel like we do so much, especially in our advisory, like talking about coping skills and coping mechanisms, and instead of like putting that back on the kids of you need to learn how to cope, like just telling the kids like it is and saying, like, let's look at what's going on that makes us have to cope, because a lot of it's not okay, and it's okay for us to acknowledge that and talk about it. Like, it's a lot to just be like, all right, it's hard, but let's learn how to cope with this. And I think just, again, airing that out too is pretty powerful for the kids to hear that we're kind of talking more at the systems level. And then the other thing, you know, like again, came from that reading too, is just like with the trauma-informed piece, you know, one of the worst things we can do is try to control our students' bodies. Obviously, there's a safety piece with that, but, you know, giving a lot of movement breaks, allowing kids to stand up at their desks and walk around, trying to get them up and writing on whiteboards as much as possible. I think just that movement has been huge, and just, and I mean, they're kids, they need to move around. They're not meant to be sitting at a desk for 45, 50 minutes at a time. So that's been a big with and just being like really purposeful about making sure that we're not trying to control our kids' bodies too often. Again, with a safety lens, of course, with that. And then from more of a content perspective, again, I was talking about this earlier, but just, you know, everything we're doing, I know with humanities, just finding those grade level texts that have to do with different social justice topics, and just having that be present in all the work that we're doing, and just giving kids an opportunity to sink their teeth into some of these conversations has been amazing. And it's, you know, we're able to get like the content target stuff out of it, but that's not the priority. It's really, it's letting kids, you know, be talking about some different situations, and again, taking those conversations back to the systems level too. It's like, yeah, we're focusing on activists and activism, but like, why do we need activists and activism? Like, what's going on that's causing people to have to step up for these and uplift these marginalized groups? So those conversations have been really great to have. So that's, I'm kind of with more, when people start talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, yes. So I'm excited to hear what everybody else is doing too.
Thanks, Kev. I think I already answered this, but I'll just like say it again. But I think something I'm trying to figure out a little bit is, while I know these are teacher moves that I'm making, I'm wondering about student to student moves, right? Like this is what I'm putting out, but what are the pieces that I'm creating for student to student interaction beyond just the conversations and the discussion? So while I love that, I can't be around to listen to all their discussions. Fortunately, there's more adults in my room this year for lots of reasons, and it's nice to have other adults around. And so I think something I'm really trying to just acknowledge is like, I'm making teacher moves that I think are helpful. I'm trying to be consistent. I'm trying to provide opportunities to meet kids' needs. And I'm just curious about where are kids able to show their efficacy? Where are kids able to show their sense of responsibility? And I think it sort of came up what other people were saying about helping to empower them. I just keep revisiting this like Invitation to Brave Space poem, and I just keep bringing it up, especially when I know that we're having hard conversations, or if something happened in the room that we're making mistakes, and to just acknowledge that this is hard work when we have to talk about hard things, and just continuing to do that, and then find the joy, right? Find the celebration, have some laughter. And I think the one thing that I just want to acknowledge is, and more, I think you brought this up, is just this idea of teammates. Like, I am every day so grateful for the adults that I get to teach with, because we collaborate, we support each other. We, you know, teaching is lonely when you're on your own. And I just would encourage finding partnership. And if you can't find it in your building, like just finding it through us, or like just finding a way to like find somebody to bounce ideas off of, or to just share your thinking. I without that this year, I think I would be feeling yeah, I think it would just be, the uphill push would be that much greater. So that's all I would say about that.
Thanks. Yeah, I look at it in two ways: the work that we do with youth, and then the work that we do with the adults. And so I guess and because I work on so many different kinds of projects, it's not, you know, it's hard to put everything into one easy package to describe what the work looks like this year. But I think a strand that really stands out is just sort of helping youth, one, have dialogue, because as it's been mentioned many, many times, that really has proven to be such a powerful outlet, helping to provide scaffolding and skills and opportunity to have dialogue in which they are the facilitators, in which they have the ownership, and we're helping to structure that and guide that, but really it's their ownership. And there is a real sense of you know, personal power within there, and connectedness and connection. And then as, you know, youth adult partners, you're really hearing both sides. You're hearing, you know, what's at the heart of what youth really want to say and share. Adults have the same opportunities to say and share what's happening on their end and their perspective, and having that give and take in the same circle is really, like, that's at the heart of creating really strong, powerful, trusting relationships. And then you can turn that around, and now that you've had that community, you can actually create more change in a really meaningful way, because you've established that space and that you're able to have those conversations. And so I think really continuing to work on dialogue in most of our schools, whether you want to call that circles or whatnot, but facilitating strong dialogue, and then really allowing, again, helping youth understand how they can start from like a strengths-based approach of what's happening in their community, right? What does school look like? What does your classroom look like? What does the community look and feel like? You know, what are the strengths that bring us together? What do we want to uphold and uplift? And then what are the opportunities to have a more positive impact and change? And really being able to dialogue around that, and then help them take those ideas and turn them into action, right? Like that's just the baseline of some action research, and showing them that, you know, the what they have within their grasp, within their motivation to make change, as part of their day-to-day, right? As part of making their school better. That's been really powerful to see that happen. And then on the adult side, I think it's been most helpful to sort of, obviously we are coming in as a help to schools, right? A support system to schools. And so trying to look for those spaces where groups and time have already been established, so that we can come in and just help support, and not have it feel like an add-on, not have it feel like, oh, and now here's another. It's like that this work should never feel like an additional, it's like, this is just the work that you're already doing. Where can we come in and sort of help when teams are established, or, you know, if you have a leadership team already happening, or these monthly meetings that are already happening, maybe this is the spot where we can come in and have the conversations around what are your needs, and how can we help support you? And I feel like that's been the best in for talking to schools, is like, where are you at? What's your capacity? What can we help you with? And just being able to have that dialogue as well with educators, and then be able to work within that system. I think that's been the most appreciated. And it's all about flexibility. Like that has been the biggest shift is just being flexible and open to meet everyone, youth and adults, where they're at to help support as best we can right now.
Thanks, Sarah. Hannah?
I guess if I were to summarize how I think about how to approach my approach with students and what they need and what I have to offer in this moment right now, I think I kind of think along lines of two main buckets. And one is a thread that I hear through things that everyone is saying about making school be a healing place, a loving, welcoming place, looking for opportunities of joy and really caring for the whole person of everyone in our buildings. And anything I can do to bring that, to offer that to students, I think is super important. The other sort of bucket is that I think a lot of kids, all kids actually, are really actually also hungry for building their skills and engaging in meaningful learning opportunities and not feeling like, oh, I don't want to, this isn't an either or thing, but I think it's dangerous if academic learning gets kind of pushed to the side because we don't have time for it. I think that's actually part of strong mental health, is for young adolescents, young adults to be feeling like they're growing and learning. And you've all talked about a lot of meaningful opportunities for dialogue and student voice, and to make that, have them feel really powerful about building skills and feeling good about themselves as learners. So I think to me, it's those two buckets that I'm really trying to, if I'm going to be putting my time and energy into anything, it's going to be one of those two buckets for students, of either really caring for them as a whole person and building that love and joy, or else really working on creating a learning experience that feels right for them, that feels engaging. And that's where some of the planning that I know that Dawn does very carefully about making something that everyone can participate in, but there's room for people to really push themselves, but everyone can really find a place that they care about, and they're learning and building their skills while they're doing it. So those are the two kind of approaches, I guess, I'm trying to focus on.
Hi, I was thinking that the social justice piece, you can just use the headlines. That's what I'm doing. The daily headlines drive the conversation. The beginning of every class is how we start. And so this week, the eugenics movement and the apology from the Vermont legislature was a part of the news. And then down here in Windham County, an organization I'm a part of just worked with the Vermont Preservation. I think that's some organization anyway, that we put up a historical marker at the exit 1 when you pull into Vermont, that stop on the right-hand side, just as you get into the state. There's now a marker there that acknowledges African-American family that established themselves in Vermont in the early 1700s, before it was Vermont, before it was part of the United States, and the struggle that they had to establish themselves here. And so it is a way to stretch out the ideas of social justice. But again, it's a daily thing. You just look at the news and you can do it. And that's been my approach at the beginning of the day. And then pace has changed for me. That's been a thing where I've had to be flexible, is the key word here, I guess. And so pace is a big deal for me now. And I'm not getting hung up with my preconceived notions about how quickly or how thoroughly a student should go through the work that we're talking about and working on together. And modification is another thing that I've put way more emphasis on this year, in modifying the kinds of things that we are working on together. And so those are those are real struggles for me as a teacher, but I think they're real struggles for students. I've just started doing group work. Here we are in October, and I've had to try to establish myself in this environment with the students in a way that I've been able to clearly identify who they're trying to be now and what their struggles are, and then giving them way more choice around where they want to go and what they want to do. You know, Kevin talked about opportunities just to get up and walk around and move and be 12 and 13 years old, and not feel like you're really being a little adult yet. I think those are really important, giving students the opportunity to choose who they want to work with and in what settings they want to try to do that work. More flexibility in those ways, because ultimately what we're trying to do, we've all said this, we're trying to make this a welcoming place where young people want to come and they feel safe and they feel like they're heard. And I have to be more flexible in my approach and my expectations for that to happen. And because the breadth of what's coming into the building is different than it has been, or maybe it's always been that way, but because of what's happened in the last few years, I see it differently. But I'm acknowledging it and trying to take steps to ameliorate the issues that might rise up if I am more in my old ways of saying, all right, we're going to do this today and we're going to get it done in half an hour and then we're moving on to this next thing. Not doing any of that anymore. So that's what I've got.
Thanks, everybody. I'm just going to connect with what Joe said about pacing. Is my sense of pacing has completely changed. And I keep going back to what one of our frequent contributors, Lindsay Hallman, always says about the slow education movement. And, you know, why aren't we going much more slowly and thoughtfully through our day? And a calm day is much better than, to me right now, than one that's packed with, we got to do this, 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 and this. But some other things that are happening, I guess, in my classes are, we're every Wednesday, we have a little bit, I have extended periods on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. So Wednesday's a short period. So we've been taking community walks every Wednesday, and that's been outstanding. That's been something that I've really enjoyed, and just walking around the town. Kids need practice walking, believe it or not, too, and understanding how to go through a crosswalk without giving their teacher a heart attack. So that's all good learning for me. And we've gone to some different areas and seen some different notices, and hopefully we're going to continue that. And then just yesterday we were on a walk and a kid was with one of our assistants, and all of a sudden the kid starts talking about stuff that is pretty deep and pretty hard to hear. And it wouldn't have happened unless we were outside walking and in a relaxed atmosphere for that particular student and that person. And so it has lots of opportunity, especially when you see kids together kind of jostling down the sidewalk and talking with each other just like kids do. It's that practice of socializing that many of them have missed, and they're doing it and there's not a lot of expectation. And so I think that's been really a positive. In addition to that, we've been doing a lot of game-based stuff. Like we play games to review. So there's a lot of, somebody mentioned bringing joy into the classroom, and Matthew R.K., who wrote that Light But Not Fire author, he talked about actually putting joy into your lesson plans. Like, where's going to be the joy today? And, having fun with the kids, a lot more of the game-based learning. We did a small cooking exploration unit last week, which was amazing because some of the kids who have a hard time controlling their body were using chef's knives marvelously and safely. Again, I was a little but they were awesome. And just that experience showed me how much we have to have hands-on project-based learning for a lot of these kids who sitting in a seat all day long is probably, puts them, it's really a struggle. And then another thing that I've been doing a lot is using picture books. I'll be using picture books, easy, graphic, and some of those picture books, Last Stop on Market Street is one, Each Kindness is another. There's lots of really great picture books out there that are connecting to my curriculum. All the kids understand it, and kids, even in 8th grade, love the read alouds. And it's just kind of relaxing. And so those are types of things that we've been doing. Also the mindfulness. And then I do want to, Sarah talked about like the dialogue piece and figuring out how to have that dialogue. And it just strikes me. So we were in a meeting, Sarah was in a meeting, and having somebody outside who can help you with the facilitation, I think was really profound for me, because you're sitting there and you're being assisted, but also thinking about how could I do this better? And the level of skill required for really successful dialogue and conversation, I think is something that we don't consider enough. And that I think, especially if you want to bring the youth partnership sort of to that next level and give them that opportunity, as Hannah said, to feel good about their learning and to feel good about the skills they're building, there's a lot of thought and skill that's required there, I believe. And it's not where you start, it's where you finish. But having that assistance was really, it really is making me think a lot about how do we have effective conversations. And holding two thoughts with one brain is also, a lot of our kids are not very skilled at it right now. And so there'll be these digressions and you'll be like, inside, you're like, we got to stick to the agenda but then you're like, oh no, go ahead, talk about your favorite ice cream. That's fine. I have all day. And that's the kind of thing that they need. And eventually a kid says, were we supposed to be talking about this? And you're just kind of, your inside voice is like, oh. But those are the kind of things that I think are really important right now. And for me, again, it's the hands-on stuff. Somebody, I think Kevin might have said, controlling their body. We take a lot of breaks. And when I talk about pacing, my instructional segments are shrinking rapidly, so that we have a lot of different activities. We have a lot of different breaks. We're going outside a lot. We're playing games, just so that kids feel like, hey, this is, this is good. I can handle this. And then you can start building in those skills that we're talking about. So that's how it's changing for me. I do feel like a lot of the times that when we have circles on a regular basis, I think I tell the kids we're having these circles so that when something big comes up, like an important conversation, you have the skills. And a lot of big things are starting to come up. And so, it's just like when you practice anything, you want to be practicing so when the chips are down, you can have a really good, strong conversation. And I think we're at the point now where we have to have a lot of those conversations, and having the structure and the skills for those will make those more effective, and will probably help your school and your learning community. So those are my thoughts. I appreciate everybody, and really, I always leave these with so many ideas and so many connections, and I really appreciate that. And I just, we're at the end of our time here, but I just want to close. If we could just go around, and if everybody could just tell one hope that they have for the next month. Our next webinar is November 18th, Thursday at 3:15. And just one small hope that you have for our next month here. And I'm just going to start. And my hope is that I can get into a full project-based learning experience for the kids, so that we're doing and not, talking or listening or sitting. That's my hope. Maura?
I've been thinking a lot about what everyone's been sharing, and I think mine is joy. Like, I hope when I walk into schools, I walk into a lot of different schools, that I sense joy in those places.
I think we're in our theater unit, and my hope right now is kids are on and off stage when they're supposed to be. No, I'm excited. I hope that they have fun with the production, and the families see the value of the hard work they've been putting into it.
I'm going to steal a little bit of both Maura and Don's. and that just being in a unit where kids can be experiencing joy, turning the reins over to the kids, and that they can experience joy from that.
My hope is that the teams that we've been working with, who've been really trying to lay the groundwork, strong groundwork for connectedness and for capacity and for joy amongst youth and adults, start to feel like it's paying off, right? Start to feel like they're getting over that September, October hump, and that they start to see some of the rewards of that.
I think my hope is that I can empower students to be speaking up for themselves and to be doing the work that they want to be doing.
My hope is that I can try to foster situations where I see more twinkling eyes. You really can't see the smiles behind the mask, but you can see the eyes when they start to twinkle. And that's my goal for this, well, for until I see more. So hopefully it'll just be this month. But students are still hesitant. They're still kind of closed, and my job is to try to make them feel like this is an open space that they can feel that twinkle.
Thank you, everybody, for your commitment, your hard work, and taking the time to share your opportunities. As I mentioned, this is my network, and it's becoming sort of a place where I can feel safe and where I can learn and I can rekindle that joy. And so I thank everybody. Our next webinar is November 18th on Thursday. I hope to see you there. And in the meantime, I hope you stay safe, healthy, and keep it up. You're doing a great job. Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening. Bye now.